began as the kind of spring day that feels aggressively ordinary, the sort of day where the biggest concern is muddy boots and a late delivery of coal. But May 31st, 1889 had other plans. In Johnstown, Pennsylvania, rain had been falling with the stubborn commitment of a drummer who refuses to end the solo. For days, water poured from the sky, turning streets into chocolate-colored rivers and swelling the Conemaugh River beyond its usual polite boundaries. Still, the townspeople weren't panicking. Floods were like distant relatives. Annoying, messy, but familiar. They had seen high water before. They believed they understood its limits. That confidence would prove tragically optimistic. Life continued with determined normalcy. Steelworkers trudged toward the mills, boots squelching in mud. Shopkeepers lifted inventory a little higher, expecting damp basements, not extinction. Children watched rain race down window panes, likely thrilled at the unexpected indoor holiday. No one looked up at the mountains with suspicion. No one imagined that 14 miles upstream, a quiet disaster was clearing its throat. Perched high above the valley stood the South Fork Dam, an aging earthen barrier holding back Lake Conemaugh. Originally built for canal systems, it had since become a decorative pond for the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, an exclusive retreat for some of the richest men in America. Steel tycoons and railroad magnates came here to escape the smoke of the industries they owned. For them, the dam wasn't infrastructure. It was landscaping. Unfortunately, landscaping that held back 20 million tons of water deserves more respect than a gazebo. Over the years, modifications had weakened the dam. It had been lowered to make room for a carriage road, because nothing says safety like shaving height off a flood barrier so two carriages can pass comfortably. Critical discharge pipes had been removed. Spillways were clogged with debris and fish screens, installed to protect prized game fish. The fish, it turns out, had better legal protection than the town downstream. Engineers had warned of danger. Locals had expressed concern. Repairs were made in the same spirit one fixes a leaky roof with optimism and straw. As the storm intensified, Lake Conemaugh rose higher and higher, pressing against the compromised dam with relentless force. Workers scrambled in heavy rain, shoveling mud, stacking stones, attempting emergency trenches. It was the engineering equivalent of trying to stop a charging bull with a broom. By mid-afternoon, water began to spill over the top. The earthen structure softened, slumped, and at 3:10 p.m., it surrendered. The dam didn't crack politely, it disintegrated. What followed was not a flood in the gentle sense of rising water. It was a moving wall, 20 million tons of water unleashed in a roaring avalanche. The reservoir emptied in under an hour, the surge racing down the narrow valley at nearly 40 miles per hour. As it traveled, it gathered everything in its path. Trees snapped. Railroad cars were tossed aside like discarded toys. Entire houses were lifted whole, briefly sailing like tragic houseboats before being smashed into splinters in Johnstown. The first sight of it defied comprehension. Survivors later described a dark, rolling mass taller than buildings, blotting out the horizon. There were no sirens. Telegraph lines had already failed. The town had minutes, perhaps seconds. Neighborhoods vanished almost instantly. Buildings shattered. Families were swept away mid-sentence. People clung to rooftops, doors, anything that floated. The water was not just deep. It was violent, filled with debris turning it into a grinding machine of wood and steel. When the flood reached the stone bridge at the edge of town, wreckage piled up in a tangled barricade. Thousands of tons of debris jammed against the arches. Then came the cruel twist. The debris caught fire. Oil from ruptured tank cars ignited, and flames spread across the trapped mass. Survivors who had escaped drowning now faced fire. It was an impossible landscape. Water below, flames above, smoke choking the sky. The scene felt biblical, minus the promise of a rainbow. In less than 10 minutes, Johnstown was effectively erased. When the water receded, it left a wasteland of mud, ash, and silence. More than 2,200 people were dead. Bodies were carried miles downstream. Some were never found. Entire families disappeared from records in a single afternoon. The industrial town that had thrived in the valley became a graveyard of twisted steel and shattered foundations. News spread across the nation, one of the first disasters covered in vivid detail by modern newspapers. Donations poured in. The American Red Cross, led by Clara Barton, mounted one of its earliest major relief efforts. Volunteers arrived by train. Doctors worked until exhaustion claimed them. Amid the rebuilding, a pressing question lingered in the muddy air. Who was responsible? Attention turned upstream to the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. Evidence of negligence was difficult to ignore, yet the legal system of the era proved remarkably flexible when wealth was involved. The disaster was ruled an act of God. No club member faced criminal punishment. No personal fortunes were dismantled to compensate the survivors. The storm was blamed. The structure that failed and the decisions that weakened it were quietly absorbed into history. Johnstown was rebuilt, testament to human resilience. But the flood became more than a tragedy. It became a warning. It exposed the cost of ignoring infrastructure, of prioritizing comfort and profit over public safety. It challenged a nation to reconsider accountability in an age of rapid industrial growth. The lesson remains uncomfortable and enduring. When warnings are dismissed and safeguards trimmed for convenience, disasters do not simply happen. They are assembled piece by piece until one rainy afternoon, they are released.